Well, let's speak now to Defence Secretary John Healey, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning, Mr. Healey. I've just been talking about Axel Rudakabana there, the most horrific crime, one of the worst crimes this country has ever seen. I'm sure you can agree. The judge made it clear in his sentencing remarks yesterday that if Axel Rudakabana had been 9 days older than he was at the time that he committed this attack, he would have been handed a whole life order. He wasn't able to do so because he was 17 at the time of the attack. Should there be a change in the law so that violent killers such as Rudakabana can receive a whole life order under the age of 18?
Well, first, you're right, this is a day of horror, and for all of us, reading the reports from the court yesterday and the sentencing, quite honestly, I struggled to get my breath by this as I read about the savagery and the horror of an attack in which it was quite clear Rudakabana would have killed all 26 of those young girls in that dance class if he could. And the judge has handed a sentence of 52 years. We respect that ruling. He's made clear that this man is unlikely ever to be let out. That's something that I would like to see. I'm happy to see him in jail for the rest of his life. But on the technicality of the whole life sentences, I think it's important to know that the last government did reduce it to 18 in line with international law after the Manchester Arena bombings, and that still stands.
Right, so you have no desire to see that change?
Well, that's consistent with international law. That still stands. There are a range of other aspects of law, of agencies who have failed in this case to step in. They knew about this man's extreme violence, but they failed to take any steps that might have prevented it. And there may be changes also in the programs that are designed to deal with this sort of extremism. That's what the inquiry, now the court case has finished, which was launched this week, will do. It started its work, and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has said that inquiry is open, and any changes that it looks to make, we'll consider, because that's a way not just of honouring the memory of the victims to ensure they get justice, but in their memory, we make and deliver the changes required.
Axel Rudakabana refused to sit through the victim impact statements yesterday. He refused to be there for sentencing. Does the legislation need to change to force defendants to sit there and hear sentencing remarks?
Yes, and it will be. As a government, we said we'll introduce the legislation this year to do that. It was cowardly. It was contemptible. The victims and their families have to face a life of his crime, and he should have been in court to look them in the eye and face the justice that he has deserved. And so we will change the law. We'll allow courts to require attendance in extreme cases like this of those responsible, using force if necessary, and other measures if that's required, like extending their sentences.
Can we talk about defence? You're stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place, aren't you, at the moment? I know you're there announcing a huge investment in using Rolls-Royce to bolster our submarines, and it's all beneficial for nuclear deterrent and all the rest of it. But you're also facing a situation where President Trump is going to basically say NATO members need to stump up more cash for their defence budget, and he's talking 5%, which is more than double what we put in now. Otherwise, it looks like he may decide America doesn't want to be part of NATO anymore. I mean, you've got some tough decisions to make, haven't you?
Of course, it's tough. Everyone agrees we need to increase defence spending. We need to do that to meet the increasing threats. It's one of the reasons that we've already increased the budget for defence by £3 billion. It's why we've got a commitment to increase defence spending in the UK to 2.5% of GDP, or what we produce as our national income. And this is a country that's not spent that since 2010, when Labour was last in government. And it's that long-term commitment to increase defence spending that is part of the reason that I can announce the £9 billion contract with Rolls-Royce, not just for the work they do now to maintain our nuclear submarines, but to develop the reactors that will power the future generation of submarines to reinforce the security of our seas and our ability to defend Britain.
Us blokes hate talking about a little thinning up top, and many of us settle with that balding look, but that wasn't for me, and that's why I went to Elite Hair, the world's leading hair loss clinic, and now I've had over 4,000 new hairs added to this barnet, and very soon I'm going to be rocking some brand new flowing locks, and you can too. So how does it work? Step 1, I sent the team a set of photos of my head. Step 2, I then spoke to one of the Elite Hair staff who looked through my photo submissions and worked out a treatment plan for me. Step 3, Elite Hair then organised accommodation and the treatment. I was at their state-of-the-art treatment centre in Istanbul, and their incredibly kind staff took me through the process, and before I knew it, I was in surgery. Elite Hair and their leading medical experts have specialised in pain-free treatments using the Sleep Deep method, and they really mean that. I felt incredibly relaxed the whole time, and I haven't felt any pain since. Check out Elite Hair using the link in the description. When you do, Elite Hair will provide you with a free personalised hair analysis. Then you'll join over 100,000 happy patients. Hit that link and start your hair growth journey like I did today.
Well, talking about the security of our seas, can I ask you about the Russian spy ship that was being monitored by the Royal Navy earlier on this week? Very concerning and alarming situation. How concerned should we be? And should the government be able to impound ships that we suspect of spying around UK waters?
We should be concerned. One of the reasons that I authorised the surfacing of the submarine close to that spy ship recently was to say to Putin, we see you, we know what you're doing, and we're watching you every step of the way. But it's also to warn the public that increasing Russian aggression threatens some of the things that we depend on for our everyday life, the undersea cables that carry our internet connections, our energy, and other things. The fact is that we can track what the hostile ships might be doing. And in the case of on Christmas Day, when that cable was damaged and broken between Finland and Estonia, the Finns boarded that ship, they seized it, so action can be taken if there are good grounds for believing that there are international rules that are being broken. So this is a warning to Putin that we and our allies, because we work very closely with Finland and Estonia on that, will act, and we'll act to defend our countries.
Whatever we do to defend our country, whatever plans you put in place, whatever spending there is, it is nothing without the men and women who serve in Britain's armed forces. You must agree with that. These people who we ask to put their lives on the line if necessary. Why then a death in service payments, and these are to people who have died not on duty but off duty, but nevertheless whilst in service in the armed forces, those payments, if they are unmarried, are now going to be taxed, subject to inheritance tax. Has the government learned nothing from the disasters you've had with winter fuel allowance and with farmers' tax? Why go ahead with something like this?
But just to be clear, anyone who does die in service will not be hit by inheritance tax. And our armed forces are nothing without the men and women who are willing to serve to defend the rest of us. That's why we brought in this first 6 months as a new government, the biggest pay rise for our armed forces in 20 years. I've done a deal to buy back 36,000 armed forces family homes, which have been in private hands and badly maintained. And why this week we passed in the House of Commons legislation to set up an independent voice, an armed forces commissioner, that will help improve service life for the future, for the people who serve and their families. We're determined to support the armed forces, support the families that support them, and we've got to renew the contract we make as a nation, if you like, with those who put on our uniforms.
So is this story in the Telegraph wrong then? Are you saying that should someone die whilst being employed as a member of the armed forces but off duty, that inheritance will not be, that death in service payment will not be taxed at all?
So for those in the armed forces who are not in service, not on duty, who die, then they will be treated like anyone else in the country.
Right, so that's a change, though. That's a change.
It may be a change, just like the change that we brought in with the biggest pay increase for 20 years, like the changes we will now be able to make because we're able to run, improve and raise the level of the services accommodation for forces families. And it's a change like the big change we're bringing in with an independent, strong voice that will challenge government, challenge ministers like me, and challenge those who lead our armed forces to make sure that service life is improved for the future.
Do you not think that's a betrayal, though? I mean, I know we're tight for time, so I apologise, but is that not a betrayal to turn around to these people and say, right, from 2027, if you die whilst employed by the armed forces, you are now going to your people are now going to have to pay inheritance tax on that money, when surely it's part of the military covenant, isn't it? Well, we employ these people to put their lives on the line if necessary, and now we're going to tax them the same as a civilian.
And when they are in service, when they are on deployment, when they are putting their lives at risk, they will be protected like they always have been. This is part of a wider change. And of course, inheritance tax affects so few of us across the country when we die. But the main thing is, on other fronts, we've taken some big steps in our first 6 months because we've got to raise the record low level of morale. We've got to deal with the long-run retention and recruitment crisis that's there in the armed forces. And we want people, again, to be wanting to join the forces. We want people who are not in the forces to be proud of what they do to keep the rest of us safe. And I'm determined as Defence Secretary to do just that.
OK. John Healey, we're out of time with you, I'm afraid. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That's Defence Secretary John Healey.
I'm slightly flabbergasted by that, to be honest, because when I first put the question to him, his response was, no, we're not going to tax them. No. But that's the difference between death in duty or death on duty payments compared to death in service. You're in service whether you're on duty or not.
You are working.
So he didn't understand that terminology, and therefore this change is happening. So if you're a member of the armed forces and you die whilst not on duty, your payments, which is 4 times your salary, which is made now, you will be subject to inheritance tax if you are single. I'm afraid I don't think that's the right message when he then says, well, we want to inspire more people to join the armed forces, we want to recruit more, we want to inspire people to be proud of our armed forces. How does that tie in with then saying, well, actually, we're going to start taxing you, should you be unfortunate enough to die whilst you're in our employ?
I'm sure lots of people would agree with you. Let me know. Let us know what you think. gbnews.com/you'll say.